Hello everyone, Wisteria here. Welcome back to Haunted Places of Yorkshire. I'm on Keighley. Now I know where it is. Now I realise. So, yeah, forget what I said last time. There are many legends at East Riddleston Hall, situated on the A650 Bradford Keighley Road. Miss Mariam Sherian of the National Trust told me that the hall's ghosts include the murderer who is reputed to lurk in the reception area, a grey lady who walks through the rooms looking for her lost lover, a small girl in blue who weeps in the corner of the porch, and a white lady who is said to have drowned in the garden pond. There is also a child's cradle that rocks without anyone being seen to push it. In 1963, however, there was an account of a haunting that does not seem to involve any of the known ghosts at East Riddleston. Mr. M. Atkins, a Keighley taxi driver at the time, was called to the hall on December evening to pick up a lady. Sweeping up the drive, he stopped alongside the large stone porch at the entrance, got out of his cab. There were no lights on either in the porch or on the grounds, and he couldn't see well enough to find the bell to push in the darkness. So he made his way round the side of the building and peered through one of the windows. There he saw a lady dressed in period attire, which surprised him, and at first he rubbed his eyes and looked again. She was still there, and then he thought, well, it was around Christmas time. She was probably attending a fancy dress party. Returning to the main door, he found it unlocked, so he pushed it open and entered the reception area, which was empty. He called out, but there was no reply. Eventually, he became aware of the faint sound of music coming from a room along the passage and made his way towards it. Entering the caretaker's room, he found a lady in normal office garb, waiting patiently for him to arrive to take her home in his taxi. Once the two were on the way back to Keighley, Mr. Atkins mentioned the lady in period dress to the passenger. She went quiet for a moment and said, "You must have seen our ghost." Mr. Atkins later insisted that he still did not believe in ghosts, but he knows for certain that the lady he saw was definitely there in the hall. Next, in March 1998, a countryside council worker had a frightening experience while working on a renovation scheme at a plantation at River Edge near Riddleston at Keighley. David Key, a member of the drainage team, looked up to see a grey hooded figure drift across the site, about 100 yards ahead of him. He quickly rushed to the point where it had vanished. There was no sign of it, but he knew he had gone that fast that if it was there, he would have seen it. And he commented that no human could have moved in that fashion, as it floated several feet off the ground, and he found it quite terrifying. However, when Mr. Key reported what he had seen to the newspaper, a colleague, Malcolm Leyland, came forward with the details of his own experience. 6 months earlier, in September 1997, he'd also seen something float across the path in front of him while he was working. He said he had never mentioned it to anyone for fear of ridicule, and although he remained very sceptical about ghosts, he was adamant that he saw something otherworldly on that day. Perhaps this is just one more example of a ghost being disturbed by building work, as the project at River Edge included the resurfacing and drainage of a bridle path that was formerly an old pack horse route and had borne the feet of many, many travellers over the years. And that's the story on Keighley. And it always gets me that because it kind of reminds me of a person's name rather than an area, which I find interesting. So then we head over to somewhere very well known, Leeds, not too far from me. Not any of these places are actually, because I am Yorkshire, so yeah. Leeds Crown Court stands on the site of various buildings, the first of which, a police station and a block of terraced houses, were constructed around 1815. A fire station was also there, though this was demolished in 1974 to make way for the present court building. There have been reports of two spooks here over the years gone by, or some researchers say two conflicting descriptions of maybe just one spook. An actual news article in local paper dated May 1994 included several accounts from various employees about an elderly, balding man in a grey suit who had been spotted crouching in a corner of one of the courtrooms. A female security guard has seen the man several times. The first occasion was when she noticed a man of this description walking towards a courtroom and, worried that he might be an intruder, she followed him. However, as soon as she stepped into the courtroom, there was no sign of the man anywhere, and all of the entrances to the room were securely locked. It was only at this point that the security guard realised that the man had not actually opened the door to enter. Instead, he passed straight through the door. A fellow security guard once saw the man in the morning as he unlocked the main entrance and was so alarmed by the experience that he refused to go anywhere near that particular area of the building, either when unlocking the doors in the morning or locking them up at the end of the day. A male cleaner also saw the man in the grey suit bending over in the car park below the courtroom. The female security guard refuses to be perturbed by Fred, as she calls him, and has got quite used to seeing him, though never at any particular point in the day. Rumours of a phantom fireman were well known during the time that the fire station stood on the site, though, as that spectre was reportedly dressed in full firefighting kit, it seems unlikely that it could be the same ghost as the present grey-suited visitor. The City Varieties Theatre in Swan Street, this is also obviously in Leeds, began as the City Palace of Varieties, and before that, as so many theatres and music halls, it was the singing room of an inn. There is a network of underground passages here, some of which run for several miles, including one that is said to lead to Kirkstall Abbey, 3 miles away. Among an assortment of reported phantoms at the theatre, two of the better known are a female singer and a male pianist. TV producer Len Martin visited the theatre to watch a revue being performed there and retired to the bar for a drink after the performance. When the bar closed for the evening, Len went to the cloakroom to fetch his coat, but the lights were suddenly switched off, and he was left there in complete darkness. As he slowly tried to make his way back to the bar area, he found the lights had gone out there too, and all the doors had been locked from the outside. Although he shouted to the other drinkers, they did not hear him, as they chattered to themselves, descending the stairs of the theatre. In the bar area, there was a coal fire burning, so Len made his way towards it, and then, not knowing what else to do, settled down to sleep on a long seat that was positioned in front of the grate. After a while, he suddenly woke and realised that the room had become intensely cold. Sitting up, he was shocked to see a lady in a crinoline dress standing beside the fire and looking directly at him. As he cried out, the woman turned to the fireplace and faded away, right through it, and the room suddenly warmed again. Len later testified that the woman had appeared solid, exactly like a real person, which had added to the shock when she disappeared through the fireplace. Worse still, he had to stay put in the pitch darkness, and it was not until the early hours of the morning that the night watchman found him there and let him out of the building. Recently, Jim McNish told the magazine of the Paranormal 40 Times about something which happened to him at the City Varieties Theatre some 20 or so years ago in June 1983, while he was a 17-year-old student studying for an A-level in stage design. As part of the course, Jim and 3 other students and their teacher were to be taken on a tour of the theatre, their guide being an employee who had worked there for some 40 years and knew the place inside out. Says Jim, he delighted in telling us stories about the many ghosts who haunted the theatre, including a red-haired female saxophonist who killed herself backstage after a boyfriend had dumped her, and a chap who would regularly walk through a wall where a door had been bricked up many years ago. At the back of the auditorium, between the lighting operator's booth and the entrance to the bar, was a door with a heavy padlock on it. When I asked what was behind the door, our tour guide told me that there was an evil, ghostly presence in there, and none of the theatre's employees would set foot in that room. Naturally, I asked if I could go in. He reluctantly agreed and handed me a huge bunch of keys, pointing out the correct key to the padlock, before retiring to the bar, saying he did not want to be anywhere near the door when it was opened. I unlocked the door and pulled it towards me, with certain feelings of trepidation. There was no light switch in the room, but missing slates in the roof allowed plenty of light to stream in from the bright summer's day outside. I could see that the floorboards had rotted away, leaving about a 3-foot drop to floor level. A ladder had been propped up from the floor into the rafters, just by the door, but the room was otherwise empty and had obviously been unused for many, many years. I stepped onto the ladder and climbed 2 rungs. As I looked up into the rafters, I suddenly felt incredibly cold. My guts flip-flopped like I was on a roller coaster, and all my hair stood on end. My heart started pumping at 200 beats per minute. I could not get out of that room quickly enough. As I leaped back into the auditorium, I expected my classmates to jeer and laugh, but they looked almost as pale as I did and agreed that they had felt something weird when I was in that room, but obviously not to the same extent as I had. I've often wondered whether I really was feeling a ghostly presence, or whether it was psychosomatic reaction to the old man's ghost stories, whether there's more mundane answer, in fact. One thing I do know is that I have often said to myself that I would like to revisit the City Varieties Theatre in Leeds to see if I would get the same feeling again, but somehow I never seem to get round to it. And I'm going to leave that part here, guys, because it's gone on long enough. But there is more from Leeds when we come back. Not from the theatre, though. Instead from a normal home. Thank you for listening, and many blessings.